Hey guys, what's up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as usual, it's a Monday, fresh start to the week. Let's see how the market performed today and how Tesla did and what we can expect for the remainder of this week. Keep in mind, Wednesday and I believe Thursday are important days. We have CPI and PPI numbers respectively. It's either Thursday or Friday for PPI, I can't remember, but CPI is Wednesday. So that's very, very important. But nonetheless, Tesla ending the day down actually quite a bit, 6.5%, which puts us just over $700 at $703. Now, guys, this is why I said last week, I did say bull trap a few times, obviously, right? And this is kind of why I bring it up sometimes, right? Like, you have to be really careful. You don't want to get too overexcited. Like, this was a pretty bullish breakout. Like, this was definitely like this was actually a much bigger trap than I expected. I'll be completely honest. I expected a trap, but not this much of a trap. This is pretty ridiculous. But regardless, I did give caution, right? How I said, be careful, don't want to chase, don't want to buy in like too much green, be careful with this market, especially, blah, blah, blah. And I did say how I wanted to see it come back down to maybe 730 to 720 and hopefully bounce off of that, reconfirm this breakout, and we're good to go. Unfortunately, that did not happen. We ended up just collapsing right back into this symmetrical, I guess, triangle, if you will. Essentially, this bear pennant that we are, I guess, back in. So we'll see what happens. I did enter some bullish positions. If just if it makes you feel any better about your current position, especially if you bought up higher, mainly because I do believe that we should potentially bounce off of the 700 here. But of course, we'll see what happens. My stop loss is just under 700 anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Maybe risking like a couple percent at most, essentially, which is perfectly fine on my end. But I also sold some puts. One pretty aggressive one at 700 and the other ones are in the 600s. And I don't mind if the 700 gets assigned personally. I'm okay with that. But I don't think the 600s will get assigned, but we'll see. You never know. Anyways, so taking a look at Tesla. So we ended up falling right back under. Pretty much, I would guess at this point, the majority of the moving averages. The EMA, we're below it now. The 5-day moving average, we're below that as well. 10-day moving average, we're below that as well. The volume here, you can see though on the volume profile, this is where like a lot of like action essentially, if you will, happens, right? This is where a lot of buying and selling of a stock happens. So we are at a pretty heavy area of volume, so which is a good sign. So we can hopefully see some good volume and buying pressure come in around roughly these levels, maybe even as low as 690-ish, 6 to 680. But I'm expecting the volume, the buying pressure to pick up in that area. So that's also why I'm feeling not too bad at the very moment. But nonetheless, this is definitely not what you wanted to see as a bull. I'll be completely honest, but I don't think it's all over just yet. So we'll see what happens with this. But Tesla did get smacked down exceptionally hard. I'm sure some of you are aware. Partly the reason, I'm sure this is some partly based fundamental stuff where the whole Twitter Elon thing, how he Friday after market closed, essentially sent a letter saying that they're rejecting the buy completely, right? So he completely like threw it off the table. And now Twitter is suing Elon for that. Essentially going to be trying to force him in court to force to buy the 5420. And that whole like debacle kind of happened, and Twitter's down 11%, which is insane, quite a bit. But Tesla, of course, getting a little bit of that side effect from that as well, with the being sued, of course, for Elon and whatnot. So we'll see what happens with that, of course. But yeah, so we're below the majority of the moving averages and everything, so that's not ideal. Fortunately for us, the Bollinger Band is still looking pretty decent. We did touch the green twice, Friday and today, and then got smacked down, which isn't too unexpected, right? I did say it usually hovers either the green or the red for a few days. In this case, it was only 2 days, which is a bit shorter than I expected, but nonetheless, once you touch one of these major lines, being the red or the green, you do eventually at some point, whether it's instantly or whether it takes maybe like a week, let's say, you do get kind of magnetized, if you will, back to the white line, which is essentially what happened today, more or less, which is why I wouldn't be surprised if we go a little bit lower, potentially, maybe just a tad under 700. It could be an insane, I'm sure a lot of people have stop losses at just under 700. I'm sure a lot of bears are going to start buying puts if we drop under like 700. So it could be like a pretty big bait for market makers right there if they do that. So we'll see what happens, of course. But nonetheless, guys, definitely wouldn't be surprised if we retrace back down to like the 690s maybe, before potentially getting a bounce. So we'll see what happens with that, of course, as it comes. Now the RSI is pointing straight down, but it is at the median, so it can potentially bounce off of this general level. That is not unsurprising. We did that over here already once, could potentially do it again. It's still looking pretty decent though, the RSI. Assuming we kind of bounce around this general level, it's still going to be setting higher highs and higher lows, which in my opinion is looking fantastic. Let's go ahead and remove this for now. Looking at the slightly shorter time frame, you can see on the 15-minute chart. Let's go up here. So we pretty much bottomed out right around here, right? Or on the 15-minute, where the RSI went all the way down to almost 20 exactly, right? When Tesla dropped pretty much straight down like an absolute brick. over down to around this kind of like 702-ish area. And we did it again, and we rallied up and we dropped actually technically even lower by very, very slightly, like not a lot, maybe like 1 point lower. But the R side didn't go lower. The R side did stay, which is good. That's slowly developing a potential bullish divergence, which is a good sign that you want to see, which tells me that, you know, short term we might potentially get a bounce. I wouldn't be surprised again if we go a little bit lower, but then the RSI ultimately still makes a higher low here, even though the stock made a lower low on this little smaller time frame, which potentially can, you know, indicate that we are going to get a very, very short term, like literally a 1 or 2 days relief rally potentially. And then from there we'll see, of course, what else it sets up for us and how we can determine what's going to happen after that. But yeah, so ultimately, guys, I guess the easiest way to put this, the volume, by the way, today pretty decent, in line, pretty average, is the fact that the bulls did not want to see this happen, right? The bulls wanted to see a bounce off of like 720, like the lowest in my opinion. So the fact that we dropped all the way down to essentially 700 on the dot, not horrible, but it's not ideal, right? It definitely puts it on more thin ice in my opinion. So I'll definitely kind of tread with caution a little bit, because this can easily fall apart as well and back down to here. We are treading on thinner ice than I thought we would, which again, if we did bounce from here, would have been much more of a bullish move, much more of a confirmation of the breakout. That did not happen. This is why you want to be careful. This is why I have my 3-day rules, which can apply to this red candle as well. So you never know, right? If we can't get back out of this wedge, I would say by like end of day Wednesday, maybe Thursday, then, you know, that's looking a little bit more sus. I'm not going to lie. But if we can, I think that's going to be good. And I do think that this is going to be a lot of like, usually if we sell into CPI, I get bullish. If we rise into something like CPI, that's where I start getting bearish, right? That's usually how the market is. Again, this could be obviously a different outcome than usual, but not financial advice, make your own decisions. But usually from what I've seen, like more often than not, if you sell into, you know, some big news coming up again, like CPI, PPI, that's usually like a bear trap, or like, you know, to scare people out before it rallies after the news comes out, and vice versa. So that's kind of what I'm expecting at the moment. Of course, we'll see what happens, but nonetheless, you know, it's just not the most ideal, not the most prettiest situation here, but I still think there's hope. I still think it's fine for the most part. Again, wouldn't be surprised to see 690 something, potentially maybe 680, but I would be surprised for 680. I think 690 might touch and then bounce, maybe 695, something like that. Pretty much lining up with the Bollinger Band right here is what I would personally expect. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing at the very moment, guys. Not the worst thing in the world, but definitely not the best thing in the world. But ultimately, even if Tesla does go all the way down to like, let's say 690 or even 680 at this point, we are still essentially making higher highs and higher lows, right? So because we essentially, think about it, right? We went all the way down here. We did a double bottom, essentially, more or less, like pretty close to a double bottom. Like that's as close as it gets, right? Then we rallied up, got rejected, smacked down to 650, higher high, or sorry, a higher low, technically a lower low here, or lower high here, but a higher low here. But then we rallied up, set a higher high, and now we're potentially going to be setting a higher low somewhere in this area, again, potentially as low as 680, maybe, but ultimately we'll still set in an ultimate higher high or higher low. Right, so that's something to keep in mind, right? So that's essentially what I'm currently seeing, and that's what I think will personally happen. But what you want to see if you're a bull, what you definitely want to be seeing, in my opinion, is you want to be seeing some buying pressure come in, like by like Wednesday. Like you really want to see buying pressure at the very least Wednesday. I think tomorrow will be a pretty flat day because it's the day before CPI, and usually it gets pretty boring and flat and stale. So I don't think too much will happen there, but you want to see some buying pressure after CPI come in Wednesday, latest by like latest Thursday, like no later than Thursday. You want to see some buying pressure come in, and you want to ideally not only get above this wedge that we just fell back into, but you also want to get above these moving averages like the EMA 21 or 21 EMA, the 5-day moving average, and the 10-day moving average, which are all sitting around this kind of like 7.8, 7.10 ish area. You definitely want to see those plus the blue line here. You want to get a bounce back out and over them once again. Is the ideal situation. Taking a very, very quick look at the indices, you can see, right, definitely a decent red day for the indices as well, 2% on the QQQ. So Tesla underperforming the market today by a decent amount, but nonetheless, the QQQ potentially getting, you know, a bounce off of this kind of little red trend line, the downtrend that it broke out of, which is pretty decent. This is kind of what you want to see for Tesla. So if the QQQ goes down a little bit more tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised, potentially, maybe like a tad more. I wouldn't expect it too much, maybe like another percent, honestly. But then that would be like, you know, a nice, beautiful bounce confirmation of the breakout so far for now, at least, which can then actually continue up and potentially play out this bear flag that we are in. SPY sitting in a very similar situation, just essentially playing out this bear flag at the very moment. But the most important one that you guys want to pay attention to is the VIX. I did mention this, right? This is really important. This is why you want to be paying attention to the VIX. It's extremely important, in my opinion. I would argue the VIX is more important than SPY and QQQ when trading Tesla. because I even said how the VIX, it is in this kind of descending wedge right here, if you will. And then, as we came down to the bottom of it, right, there's a decent chance that it will find some form of bounce from this area. And that's exactly what happened. We bounced up, had a very nice bullish bounce. It was up like 8% at one point. But when this happens, that's usually a good sign that the market is going to be tanking, and that's exactly what happened today. So, and I did say how I'm surprised that the VIX potentially does this little bounce and then potentially comes back down maybe one more time, which I think will personally line up with what I currently have the projections for, with the indices, Tesla, and everything getting a little bit more of a rally after CPI. The fear is kind of out, you know what I mean? The VIX will kind of fall down even further, probably come down to like maybe the 24, 23, something like that. And then ultimately, I think that's where it might start finding the bounce, probably come back up here, dance around this area. And then once the VIX ultimately, essentially what you want to be looking at is once the VIX ultimately breaks out of this blue line and breaks out to the north side, out of this descending wedge, almost like a massive bull flag, if you will, but it's getting a little too much of, it's getting too low for a flag in my opinion. But nonetheless, once it breaks out to the north side of this falling wedge is where you really want to be careful. If you're a bull, really want to be careful on like, stocks, right? That's where it gets a little scary. So very, very important you guys pay attention to this. But yeah, that's it for this video. Let me know what you guys think down below, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.